Good morning. What I would love to do is have a chat with you this morning about the work of Albert Camus in his book, The Myth of Sisyphus. So I just want to talk about what he means by the word absurd and what he means by living a life of revolt. Now, the reason why I thought I'd talk about this is because we're actually doing The Myth of Sisyphus in the book study this Sunday and next Sunday. And that's actually also going to be a run in to the next book we're doing, Christ and the End of Meaning. Um, and these fit to some extent actually with my interest in Pascal that we've explored in the past. And I want to come back to Pascal at some point, probably in the next 6 months or so, because I think we can mine him a little bit more. So, anyway, loving this book. Guy Andrew, who's part of the book group, he recommended we do it. He's been recommending it a few times, so we finally jumped in. I read it once when I was very young, but it feels mostly new to me. I can remember the very famous opening. It's a brilliant book, by the way, so please do check it out. I shared it on my Patreon actually, so you can get it there. The opening line is basically the only serious question is whether or not to kill yourself. So it kind of starts off very strong, says everything else is kind of like just wall candy. This is the important thing, whether life is worth living or not. And what he does in this very short and beautifully written text is he basically isolates what he would argue is a basic truth that we can all know, and then he wants to ask whether we can live in light of that truth. Can we look at the face of truth and live? And the life that says yes, that affirms living in the truth, is a life of revolt. So very quickly, for those of you doing the book study, we'll go into a lot more depth very soon. But yeah, very quickly, the absurd is an experience that actually really fits very neatly with stuff that we've been looking at for the last decade or more. It really fits neatly with this idea of contradiction. What Camus is arguing, and he's in a certain kind of context in which these ideas are being explored in various philosophical traditions, including at the time existentialism and phenomenology. And Camus is very often seen as an existentialist, although in this book he critiques existentialism, and I'll mention why he does that because it's a very interesting critique. But anyway, he basically says that we find ourselves desiring some sort of meaning and fullness and satisfaction, right? Certainty and satisfaction. We find ourselves in our bodily desires and in our mental life wanting something that will get rid of desire, right? So certainty and satisfaction can be, right, because certainty at the level of the mind, satisfaction at the level of the body. This is very Pascalian. So in Pensée, Pascal does an incredible job of describing the human condition as one that lies between the nostalgia, what Camus calls the nostalgia for an oceanic oneness, a wholeness, and a certainty, and the reality that life seems to resist giving you that. Not that there is no meaning. Camus doesn't want to say, he's kind of trying to only say what he knows to be true, because maybe the world has meaning, but we encounter a type of lack of certainty and satisfaction. Brief moments where life is wonderful and good, but if we are sensitive to the human condition, we will find what Simone Weil calls affliction. She also calls it suffering. What Pascal calls misery, what Heidegger calls anguish, Kierkegaard calls anxiety despair, right? That all of them are basically saying the same thing, that if we're sensitive to the human condition, we will discover a disconnect. The absurd is not that life appears not to have meaning. It's that we want it to have meaning and it seems to resist meaning. The absurd is living in that contradiction. And Camus outlines how we attempt to avoid this contradiction and living in the light of this contradiction. And the two extreme positions, you could say, are despair on one side, which is suicide, ultimately taking one's own life to get rid of this absurd existence. On the other side, to elude it, to evade it, to distract ourselves from it in various ways, what Pascal called divertissement and Camus terms eluding. And we can elude in various ways. Dogmatism, right? You might find a dogma that you just believe to be true on the authority of the people who give you that dogma or on the authority of the text. Then there can be hope, where you're thinking, okay, life's absurd now, but maybe in the future it won't be, and you're living to some sort of hopeful future where you will have the answer or you'll have the thing that will fix everything. There's forms of New Age or spirituality, which might attempt to, not through dogmatism, but through kind of spiritual practices, kind of like try to calm this experience of the absurd. Maybe extreme versions of that will be extreme fasting, extreme meditation, or hero's dose of psilocybin, or God bombing 5-MeO or whatever, right, to try and get rid of that absurd. Which again might work momentarily, but Camus would say that, in a way it works to the extent that you disappear. And to the extent that you are a subject in the world, the absurd clings to you like a disease, right? It's your human condition. And this is where Camus' critique of existentialism comes in, actually, because he says, well, existentialism is based on this insight. The existentialists all kind of basically have this idea of radical freedom and contradiction and absurdity. But he says even existentialists tend to give a way out. I mean, the most obvious example, who's a proto-existentialist, but is Pascal, who has a wager. You can't have this full jouissance, this full pleasure, this full satisfaction, but you can wager on it. You can renounce earthly pleasures, and you can act as if you believe. And so this is Pascal's way out. For Kierkegaard, there is the leap into the God beyond reason. There's various kind of other thinkers like Husserl phenomenology, which is more like a Platonic ideals that lie behind everything that we can know, right? So whether it's reason or the leap or the wager, there's ways of trying to get out of this. And this is where Camus' work reminds me of Julie Reich, because if you know Julie Reich's work, she's very sensitive to the ways in which we attempt to avoid the truth of the human condition and the truth of this, what Camus would call absurdity of being. Now, that doesn't mean you don't have beliefs and you don't have ideas about how the world works, nothing like that. It's just Camus says that no matter what we believe, no matter whether it's dogmatic or spiritual, or it's about hope for the future, or it's about some material satisfaction or some sort of philosophical solution, whatever it is, you can never get rid of a type of absurdity, a type of questioning as to that truth. You can only get rid of that insofar as you close your eyes, distract yourself from the reality that we live in this space where, as I say, we seek and desire meaning, and meaning seems so elusive and impossible. So Camus outlines that. He talks about, say, despair on one side and distraction on the other to avoid this. And he simply goes, what does it mean? Like, he's writing this book almost to himself. I mean, that's why I read it. It's almost like he's trying a thought experiment, which a lot of philosophy is about at times, where you like Descartes, who kind of thought, what can I doubt? Can I doubt everything? And does a thought experiment to try to get to something indubitable. Well, Pascal's indubitable is the absurd. And he's basically asking, can I and can anyone remain true to the absurd and not try to dull its reality, and not try to get rid of it with a wager or a leap? And he calls the stance in which one embraces absurdity revolt. He calls it another time, I think, like an eternal revolution, an eternal vigilance, right? So you, in a way, always remind yourself, no matter what you believe about romantic life, philosophy, theology, whatever it is, that there is a certain absurdity that you can never get rid of. That's an experience of the human condition. And instead of trying to avoid it, you live, you embrace it, you tarry with it. Now, this is not dissimilar from what Lacan might say when he talks about traversing the fantasy, where we have these fantasies, which are our ways of thinking about how to get full oceanic satisfaction. It's a kind of a staging of that. Traversing the fantasy doesn't mean you don't have fantasies, but it means that you know that your fantasies are fantasies. You know that the things that you daydream about and you fantasize about, you might not actually ever really want. Or you might want to have a little bit of, but you realize that there's that to get everything you want would be its own horror. That's partly what Camus is saying here, is that the absurd is just the realization that anyone who's promising you certainty and satisfaction can't deliver it. It's a very different approach, obviously, to the spiritual approach, where somebody might say, if you do enough meditation, you come to the truth that everything is at peace, right? Camus is going, no, like, and the existentialists in general are like, no, when you really understand the human condition, alienation is an inherent aspect of it. And also our dislike of alienation, right? Those are the two things you find. You find you're alienated, you find you don't want to be alienated. And instead of trying to get rid of one of those poles, right, to either say, you cannot be alienated, or I don't care, right? You go, how do I acknowledge that both of these are real things that make up the very essence of what it is to be a subject? And then embracing that is a life of revolt. So very quickly, I'll just say how that kind of fits maybe with the work of parotheology, where a lot of this liturgy and this idea of God is not that which gets rid of the absurd, but rather is what God is the name of the absurd, and embracing the absurd and tarrying with the absurd is kind of like the emancipatory movement, the moment, which is very, very difficult to do. So that's kind of what, I don't know, as a little introduction to the myth of Sisyphus. There's more in it, and there's more to it, and I recommend you have a read. But I just wanted to check in with you again, because it's been a while since I've done one of these, because I've been giving out those weekly Church of the Contradiction videos, so I thought I would not overwhelm your inboxes with videos, but I also did want to say hi. And also remind you, if you're interested, Spark is coming up in October. I've got about 10 tickets left. I would love to get rid of all 10 of those. So if you're interested in joining me, it'll probably be the last one I do. At least there won't be one in 2026. Might try and do one in 2027. So this is the year to go if you would like to experience that. And in light of what Spark is about and its relationship to Camus is promising nothing but the truth. And that's very key in Christianity and in psychoanalysis, that the truth is what's emancipatory. You shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. It doesn't offer therapy, it doesn't offer techniques for being happier in life or anything like that. All it offers is the truth. the truth of your condition. And in Spark, in a very personal way, it's about taking 5 days and glimpsing some of the truth of your own desires, the repetitions, the things you do in your life that sometimes trip you up, and getting to know what's going on in those repetitions, so that you might be able to get into the driver's seat, and that they will be less painful and more productive. All right, have a great day. Bye-bye.